Hi, Svenja. It's such a pleasure to have you as my podcast guest today.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, and I'm really excited to dive deep into your story and your curatorial vision and what you do. But as usual in my podcast, I have a few warm-up questions that we start with. So,
hmm
talking about historical artists that you would like to meet, who would it be and why?
For me, I guess it would be Lee Krasner. I love her story. I love that she was like the wife of Jackson Pollock, but then again, like him as a man, he was like blown up so much bigger as an artist than she was. But I feel like her voice is like at least as interesting to be heard. And I feel like she hasn't been given as much attention. And of course, I'd love to, like, yeah, she's definitely one of my favorite artists I'd love to meet.
I agree. And like when artists or people interested in art ask me, like, what artist should I do research on or should I know more about? It's definitely learning more about her story and her view and vision because she was as important as her husband.
Yeah, totally. And like so many, like we all know, like I don't know when I went to high school, like Jackson Pollock is definitely one of those names that will definitely pop up at some time, some point in like art history class. But Lee Krasner, I only learned about her much later on in my life. And I feel like it's really important to learn about these people in our history. Yeah, especially from a feminist point of view.
Exactly. And then if you can own any piece of art and price wasn't an issue, what would it be?
Um, I guess it's not only if price wasn't an issue, but also if it would still exist. So my favorite artwork is by Tracy Emin, The Tent. Tracy Emin was one of those artists that I first discovered when I was a teenager. And I moved to London straight after my A levels. I grew up in Germany and I moved to London. And she was like one of those artists that I learned about when I was living there. And I don't know, I felt like she was one of those voices that really spoke to me as a young woman and growing up and finding my place in this world. And her work like really like deeply touched me. So yeah, it would be that work of hers.
It's so wonderful to hear. Like, I've been doing quite a few interviews so far with industry professionals, and so many support female artists and have like favorite artists and artworks coming from female artists because I think we all see this big difference in representation and share of their stories with the world.
Yeah, completely. I think we are like in like the past years, this discussion has been so much more prominent. And yeah, for me as a woman, I mean, of course, women speak differently to me that like, and their work speaks differently to me than male artists' work. And especially like when I remember like the way I kind of got into the art world, I got interested in it. It was like from a very emotional point of view. And that was mostly like, yeah, there was mostly female artists that kind of sparked an interest and where I felt seen or heard and understood with my own feelings and experiences. So I think it's really interesting and very, very important for us as a society to talk more about these artists and yeah, so their voices get more like heard more.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. And talking about unexpected places you've seen good art, what are those places beyond just galleries and museums?
I really thought long and hard about this question, to be honest. Like it was a tricky one. But I remember as a child, I went on holiday and I didn't expect anything, but then I was at Nikita Safal's garden. And that was like magical. And I didn't know what to expect as a child, you know, like you're on holidays with your parents and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to see this garden. And then suddenly you're in this amazing universe and you're like, wow, what is this? And it was kind of like difficult to comprehend. And obviously at that time I was like, I don't know, I was like maybe 8 years old or something like that. Um, I had no idea really who Nikita Safal was or what are these figurines and the whole impact of that of those sculptures. So yeah, that was probably one of the most unique and unexpected places where I've encountered amazing art.
Yeah, it also had an impact and it's memorable for you. And I think it relates really well to the next question of like, in your opinion, what iconic or timeless art is.
Um, I guess for me, it's when an artist is able to capture a certain point of view, a certain feeling, a certain identity, and its very own voice, you know, like that is like, of course, we're all influenced and art is influenced by other artists, etc. But if someone can actually create their own voice and brings that to life, that for me makes something unique and timeless.
Yes, I agree 100%. And a lot of artists, when they produce work, they think or overthink about like, oh, people will hate it, people will love it, who I'm making it for. You should make it for yourself first and foremost. We rarely, or we speak about art as healing, but it's a bit of a taboo to say in a lot of art schools. I don't know if it's the same in Europe, but share your story first and foremost, and then you will find people who will share the same experience who will follow you.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. And I mean, like, yeah, of course, there are different ways how to create, like, where you find your inspiration, but it's often from your own biography, right?
Exactly, your personal
Mhm.
background for sure. And you started talking about your childhood, and then you traveled and you see different forms of art. So, how has your passion evolved over time for art?
So yeah, as I mentioned, like with my parents, I saw a lot of art. And I visited like hundreds of churches, etc., in like Italy and France. And they were very adamant about those things. And it was like really important growing up. And then at some point, I got kind of interested when I was like, I don't know, like 14 years old, maybe. I got very interested in the old masters. So my love really grew from there. And then only after like 6 years or something like that, I actually started to get into contemporary art that I started to fall in love with. And my first two icons were Tracy Emin and Marina Abramovic. Um, yeah, and then it just like developed from there, and I kind of dove deeper and deeper into it. And eventually I moved to Berlin, um, and I got to know a lot of artists who live here and work here. And yeah, and that's basically how it all developed. But it was like I was always deeply interested in it. It was like my passion. It's been my passion basically all my life.
Yes, and I think for you, seeing so many artworks, exhibitions, galleries, museums, and whatnot really help you to develop your tastes and like what you want to do next as a curator. Maybe like what's is missing or what should be more thought and talk about. In terms of your favorite exhibits or maybe something like memorable that you saw in the past, can you name maybe one or a few that you think were
Mhm.
key moments that you say like, wow, this is a great exhibit?
Yeah, so I saw an amazing exhibit last year in Paris, like a bunch. Like they had so many good ones in Paris. So the work at the Louis Vuitton Foundation was incredible. But for me, my personal favorite was literally like the Mike Kelly at the Bourse de Commerce at the Pinot collection. I literally had tears in my eyes when I saw that show. I was so touched by it. And I was like, wow, this is the reason why I'm doing this and why I'm in this field. And everything made sense. It was so human. It was so, yeah, I was deeply, deeply touched by that exhibition. That was a very important moment for me to feel that, because sometimes, you know, like when you're working in this industry, it's a very tough industry, you know, and it's draining and it's tiring. It can be very frustrating, but then again, it can be so fruitful and yeah, just like very fulfilling. And that show made me realize why I want to be part of this, you know, and why I am part of it. uh, so yeah, that was like by far one of the best shows I've seen in the recently.
Yeah, and I think that's the best comment any viewer can give to an exhibit, that it touched you personally. I think that's the goal that a lot of curators have in their mind, that it will stay with people on a personal level. But also, I can totally relate to your experience working in the industry. There are days where I say, oh my God, I have to talk to so many people, please. Can I be on my own, just do my things? And then there are days where it's like I'm so excited to hear all the people's journeys, experiences, because you meet so many diverse people throughout the years, throughout the weeks, when you especially like curate shows. You just open a dialogue, and then it's just like a snowball effect. People talk about it beyond just the physical space.
Yeah. That's, it doesn't get much better than that, right? If that happens. And then when you meet people and they had like a similar reaction to it or feel differently about it. And that's when it gets like really interesting, when you can actually like discuss what you saw and why you enjoyed something or why you hated it. That happens quite often as well. That you just like that you're like kind of disappointed. But then when you hit it, that's like the best feeling in the world.
And that's always a learning experience. Like there will never be a perfect exhibit,
Do you
because
reckon?
there should be something better coming up always. As like with an artwork, you're never creating your masterpiece. You're always aiming to create it.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. But sometimes it gets pretty close.
Yes, that's a good way to see it. And then you mentioned that you're based in Berlin now. Can we chat a little bit about the art scene in Berlin and how it's evolving locally, but also on the international level?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm based in Berlin. Berlin is very diverse. So many artists are moving here to the city to work here and live here. I meet a lot of artists, and there's still so many galleries around in the city. So it's a quite an interesting area in that sense. Germany has like two main areas for art, right? It's like around Cologne, Düsseldorf, and then Berlin. Um, I feel like Berlin is not really like a painting based like area. It's not really like there are a lot of artists who work with different media, who are not like classically trained painters in that sense, which is quite interesting if you're into that. And there are like so many very young galleries around the city, like so many new spaces are opening up. It's difficult to keep track of it, like all the new places
Can you name a few galleries that maybe someone is like traveling to Berlin soon and they should for sure visit?
they should visit. So a fantastic gallery, like smaller galleries, you know, that maybe not like a bit off your radar. I think Gallery Stahlmann Galleries is amazing. We just collaborated with them for Venice. Antonia Niczewski has a new space in Mitte. He's a very good gallerist as well. He has a very good program, young artists. I really like Kat Ludde as well. They're in Schöneberg. They've been around for a while. Yeah, they have more established positions as well in their program. Um, of course, I love, yeah, Russi Klenner is a great gallerist. He's in Kreuzberg. Yeah, I mean, then we have like a bunch of like top galleries, like Max Hetzler. It's definitely one of my favorite galleries in the city. And Pace actually just opened a branch in Berlin. They opened, yeah. I just attended the opening no, it was this month. We're still in May. So yeah. There's kind of like two festivals in Berlin, like the first weekend in May. We have Gallery Weekend, and then in September there's Berlin Art Week. So those two events are really interesting. If you want to visit the city for its gallery scene, you should consider coming around May or September.
Yes, I know that there's so many galleries and like art forms to see in Berlin. I just connected someone earlier this year who had a non-for-profit gallery in Berlin before they moved to Toronto, and
Mm-hmm.
they like same things, that it's not as much like canvas art or sculpture art. There's so many experimentation happening in the city with different mediums and forms, and I think that's really something for us. Like, we're based in North America and we're so focused on like traditional art, especially for like collecting those types
Mm.
of things for especially investment purposes, so that we forget that the progression is happening, technology is changing, and we should look and open our eyes, because there are so many other mediums are flourishing and are worth considering.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think it's very interesting when artists dive into other materials and forms. And Berlin is definitely a place for that. Yeah,
Absolutely. And I know that you're a co-founder of POV Contemporary. Tell us
exactly.
more about the organization, your curatorial vision, and what you do.
Yeah. So basically, I founded POV Contemporary with a friend of mine. Like we were friends first, and then we met on holiday, and we realized that we have the same passion right away. And we stayed in touch. We became friends, and at some point, we decided that we wanted to work together. And we basically operate as a gallery, but without a physical space. So we always look for spaces where we want to put on shows. But it's very like the projects that we do are very holistic in terms of we find an artist first that we want to show, and then we decide, okay, but in which country do we want to show him? In which city do we want to show him? And then we actually start actively looking for a place that we have in mind that would be ideal to show their work. So the logistical work is a lot behind that, but for us, it makes it's really interesting to work like that instead of having a physical space in a city that you have to put on a growth program for. So we kind of do it the other way around. Yeah, then we just put on shows. We try to pick out um, we try to pick out like the busiest events or most important events in the art scene and kind of do a show there in the city. So we just did Venice Biennale opening, we did something in Venice. We're looking to do something for the Berlin Art Week. We're going to do something for Paris, for the Art Basel Fair in Paris, etc. So yeah, And that's what we do, but we also represent those artists and we want to work longer with them. It's not just like a one-off pop-up show that we do.
Yes, and I think it's kind of you're wearing multiple hats when you do the approach. You're not just a gallerist, you're also like a dealer in a way, you're a curator, event organizer, and whatnot, social media marketer, and all those things that we do in the industry. But also, like the approach itself is new. I think the industry is changing and more people are reconsidering the brick and mortar and more
Yeah.
focusing on online and reaching diverse and further audiences beyond just the city or the country where you are, and the travel aspect. I think that's the way to go these days.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like, I mean, that's how we came up with this concept because like we were traveling so much anyways. And I felt like the art world is moving around constantly, right? And instead of asking the art world to come to you, we basically decide, okay, we come to you now. So you don't have to come to us. And so far, it's been a really good experience doing it like that, especially starting new and starting fresh as a gallery project, how you want to call it. For us, it made sense so far. And then, of course, we also have the salon aspect. So for every show that we open, we host a special salon, which means the salon is also in its whole concept part of the artist's practice. It can be any sort of event. It could be like a dinner, it could be a brunch, it could be a tea, I don't know, it could be anything. Food doesn't always have to be involved, but it's nice, of course. Yeah, maybe there will be music or performance as part of it. So yeah, but all these projects, like the salon is always like a holistic project within the artist's practice and within the space that we're hosting the show.
Yes, and that was my next question because I think that's genius because people always ask like when is the artist going to be in the gallery? Just beyond the reception, obviously. And artists are those people that sometimes don't want to be always present or speak to people and they want the work to speak for itself. But those smaller, kind of like by invite only events, is an opportunity for people to get a deeper understanding of the work, make connections, friendships with the artists, and become lifelong collectors and supporters, not just the visitor, quote unquote, of the show. So, how do you usually select your guests, who to invite to come to those salons?
Um, so it's a very diverse group of people that we invite. It's usually collectors that we know. It can be other people who work in the industry, but also people who work in similar industries as like the fashion industry or music industry, any kind of creative scene. So we really try to mix and match those people because like maybe a third or even less of our attendees for these salons are actually collectors, you know. We try to, yeah, it's really just like a diverse group of people that we curate that make sense for the artist and the artist stage they're in at that moment. Because like all the artists, they have different needs, what could be interesting or what they're looking for, what they need. It's not always only just sales. It could be also like institutional people so that would be the focus for them, or press or whatever. So yeah, so we try to diversify our guest list as much as possible and to basically make the most of it for the artists and our guests, of course, as well, to connect and to socialize during one of our events.
Yes, and I think that's a really great point that we have in this podcast that sales are not the only measure of success whether it's an artist selling independently or a gallery, industry person having a show. There's so much more. It's also like networking opportunity for the artists and the people coming through the doors. And for you, like you mentioned, like sales is not the measure of the success of the event. Like holistically, how do you say this was the best event ever, or we need to work on XYZ next time?
I mean, of course, we also measure the success in net sales, but like, for example, feedback of our colleagues is really important. Like the feedback, how our attendees perceive the event is really important. Prior to the salon, we discussed with the artist what they are kind of trying to get out of it, or what is important to them to get out of the event. And depending on that, we also create the guest list, of course. And like, let's say an artist is interested in doing a show at an institution, of course, we invite those people that are kind of interesting for that. And if they actually would get an institutional show out of it, that would be a very successful event for us, even if we did no sales. So yeah, you can measure the success of an event in all sorts of forms, I think. But for us, it's mostly for what's important for the artist, and that doesn't always need to be necessarily sales.
Absolutely. And then you started talking a bit about Venice Biennale, that you were part of it and you had your first show there. Can you describe the benefits and opportunities of showing in the platform like a Biennale for artists and art institutions in general?
Yeah, so we really don't believe in like the physical space and one specific spot, but we think it's really important to go to like a hotspot for the art world, which gives our artists the chance to be seen by a huge amount of people that don't necessarily live or travel to one area. So the exposure amount is just like beyond anything that we would probably achieve on a normal Thursday evening in Berlin. So yeah, that was really interesting and important for us, and kind of of course successful when we did the Biennale event. Yeah, those events are just like, I mean, everyone is there. All the major collectors are there, all the art dealers are there, advisors, etc. And it's interesting to see if an artist does well in their home country, and then it's such a big chance to put them out in the world, and see how international people perceive it, the work, and yeah, it can give an artist a massive push. And for us, that was very successful to do the Biennale event for those reasons.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm really interested to hear about your curatorial selection, especially as a new organization. How do you select which artists you want to represent, work with, and exhibit? And I know it like comes in time. You don't inboard like 50 artists like right away. It's a slow process of taking a few at the beginning and then grow your collection.
Yeah, so we decide on that together, my colleague and I, and we look for artists that have their own voice, um, we decide together what we believe is contemporary. But for us, most important is really that the artist has their own voice and their own perspective and their own practice. We don't really focus on any media, so it can be painting, sculpture, video, performance, you name it. Yeah, but for us, really, like the most important part is that this artist has their own point of view, and that's actually how we came to our name as well. We really wanted to show something that has its own voice and yeah, standpoint.
Yes. And I think you work with artists in a partnership because you're as interested in their success and becoming bigger as artists as just selling their works. So what do you see happening in the industry in terms of like challenges artists facing and how you think they can overcome those?
Mhm. So I think a lot of artists talk to me because they want like a gallery representation, or they're not selling themselves. And we discuss this all the time, like price transparency, how pushy can you be marketing wise? Can you put your price online on Instagram if you want to sell something, those things. Like there's this kind of criteria that artists feel they have to oblige, but then nothing really happens. So it's a difficult tango, I suppose, where you can you have to socialize and you have to meet people and you have to go out there. But then again, don't go to an art fair. um, uh, I mean, I would die if I were an artist, I'm like, wow, who made all these rules and how do I even know about these rules? No one is telling you about these rules in art school. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in price transparency. I think it's really important to put it out there how much your work is and what you feel your value is for it. Um, And yeah, so I think that's a very big discussion, and I think it's just really important to do it, yeah, to focus on those things. And regarding gallery representation, I feel like don't be pushy, don't don't show down too much. Like let them come to you, but they will come, If you do group shows, try to connect with people, try to connect with other artists that are kind of speaking or like working in the same field as you, or kind of yeah, where you feel like you have kind of a similar way of working. um I would definitely even try to put on shows yourself, and invite people and advertise that on Instagram. Put yourself out there. I think that's like really important. Don't just wait at home on your studio, and be professional. So put on your work on Instagram, show it in different ways. Don't just show like a repro of it, but maybe there are even apps where you can do those things, where you can like upload your artwork and then it kind of shows, like then it will be like displayed in kind of like a home setting of the collector or something like that. So you get an idea of the size of the work, etc. So yeah, I think those things really help. And then of course, write down the price, because um that's the biggest issue. Like so many people want to buy art. There are a lot of young buyers in Berlin, but they're kind of hesitant to ask how much something is because they're kind of scared to be in this like awkward situation where it's like too much money or not. It's like just like state your price and then you'll see like the sales will come in.
Yes, I totally agree. And even if you don't have a shop on your website, you can still show the prices and have a button for people to inquire to learn more. Having multiple images, I find, is helpful when people can see everything like through different sides or in relation to other objects, because sometimes looking online, you can't really feel the size
Yeah.
unless you see it in person, but be more creative, making your own opportunities. I agree with that 100%. Like collaborate, show, not in galleries, but there are so many other places, as we spoke, where you can have a show and bring more people in, versus maybe sometimes people are still don't feel welcomed or enough quote unquote educated, even though it's not true, that they can go to galleries. But also as a curator, you've probably get a lot of emails from people asking about like how to work with a curator and how to collaborate.
Yeah.
Like, what is your advice on like if someone wants to contact a curator and introduce?
Um, yeah. Have a proper CV, have a good PDF, have a PDF with prices. Like I get so many PDFs or like, and there's no pricing. I'm like, why is there no price? I need to know. And if you're insecure about your pricing, consult with someone, talk with them about it. Um, how to calculate those prices for you, but you have to kind of give me a price. Don't rely on me to make your price, like to set your price. I can, of course, like if we're further in the process, I can advise you on pricing strategies for your work, but at the beginning, when someone just approaches me, I kind of want to know where they feel, where they stand with their pricing. And then, of course, have a good website, have a good Instagram account. And I feel like a lot of artists that approach me have a very personal Instagram account, which doesn't really help. Like, you can have your private Instagram account or do like close friends only or something like that. But definitely have like a proper Instagram account where I can see your work, where I can see some, yeah, studio impressions, yeah, different kinds of imagery. That definitely helps. Yeah, and don't be too shy with the pricing strategies.
Yes, for sure. For me, I don't know, it happens more and more often where people will fill out the like contact form on the website saying like, oh, like I'm interested to learn more about how to work together without even
Mm.
stating a link to their website or attaching anything. And I'm like, and what can I do with it? I can't even like check who you are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh wow. Okay. And I've never gotten that. I get a lot of requests on Instagram
Mhm.
where people kind of, yeah, approach me and they want to work with us or with me. And um yeah, sometimes like I had one girl, she even pitched me a whole show with her friend. Which I thought was actually kind of cute to do that. But I feel like that's not really the way to go. Um, yeah, it happens very rarely that I actually think, oh yeah, this works for me. So also be aware who you're approaching and be aware of what you kind of work, like what kind of work do you do and who are you approaching, and does this actually make sense what you're sending out? Because sometimes it feels like, oh, they just picked like 150 people and they're like sending this out and it doesn't really add up. I don't know. It was like some artist from South America and it's like, wow, just like logistic wise, like I wasn't sure like if she'd even realize that I'm based in Germany, as an up and coming, like I think she was just finishing art school. So yeah, I think stay local at the beginning at least, maybe. Don't make it too complicated. Don't make it too complicated for the people. Um, yeah, and for me, really, pricing is very, very important that people know their value.
Absolutely. Do you see in Berlin or like in general in the industry that artists are more relying on like the formula where you multiply like the lengths by widths and dollar amount or euro amount?
Yeah, yeah, we do that a lot. So we calculate a lot with a factor. That's a very common practice, even for sculpture.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's difficult for sculpture though, depending on the material and everything.
exactly. For sculpture, it's really difficult. I agree. But for painting, I think at least to a certain degree, it's a pretty good indicator where an artist is standing in their career. Yeah. Yeah. But then, of course, it depends on so many other factors, you know.
Exactly.
But
And are there any myths or maybe misconceptions about curators or industry in general that you would like to debunk today?
sometimes I think a lot of people think that we are like over intellectualizing a lot of things, you know, that for us it's not really like a feeling or hard decision, or like I think a lot of processes are really just like a gut feeling, and why you're interested in something. At least that's what happens at the beginning. And at some point when you're a bit like the advanced level, then you're kind of interested, why do I think this is so horrible? And that kind of suddenly weirdly interests you, you know? And then you dive deeper into that. Yeah, I think that's a big myth. And then I think another big myth is that art people are kind of stuck up. Uh, which I don't really agree with. I think we're such a weird bunch of people. And um, there's not just like one person, like one personality type of, yeah, who works in that industry. There's so many like different variations of people. Yeah. Yeah, and not everyone, like I come from architecture, right? I have an architectural background. I'm not a studied art historian, um, which is not rare at all. I know a lot of people who did not study history of art and work in the industry very successfully now.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that's okay too. And like even talking about artists, you don't need to go to art school. Like it adds a lot when you do your research, you like really formulate your practice because you have a platform to do so, but also it influences a lot. You don't learn a lot about art business in art school. But there are a lot of like self-taught artists that are well regarded in the industry and represented by galleries. So there is not a specific formula of like of a success.
Yeah.
And your work doesn't need to be super conceptual too. Your story, your personal story is a concept itself. Just find
Totally.
what works for you.
I totally agree with you. I mean, look at Christo, you know, Jean-Claude and Christo. Um, so successful, but they were really business people. I mean, um they funded all their projects and it's really quite incredible. But yeah, I feel like as an artist, you have to be capable of a lot of different things. But a very big part is, of course, also being a good entrepreneur for your own business.
Exactly.
Yeah, and a lot of artists are very shy about that. And I always wonder why. I mean, I understand that you have to rely on people like us to sell their work because it's also, of course, like a much easier to sell someone else's work than your own work, you know. I understand that part, but yeah, I can't repeat myself often enough regarding pricing. No, because it's something I've really encountered so much in these past weeks, you know, where people send us PDFs, beautiful works, like very, very good artworks, but no prices to be found. And I think it's so important to talk about this more often and with a clearer and louder voice, that it's totally okay to show your price and not be secretive about it. Because in the end, we think it's like not cool to show the price, or that you should not do it, that it's not the proper way to do it. But who made that rule. It's literally like the blue chip galleries who made that rule. But those artists are not playing in that field yet at all. So why follow those rules of that market when you're not even part of that market yet?
Exactly.
It's
Like I was just thinking the same thing when you were chatting about it. That when you're probably like as an artist not contacting blue chip galleries right away. Like you start somewhere at the beginning, like lower mid-tier galleries, and then you get discovered by those galleries. So and they usually have prices on their websites. They don't have this structure of like inquire us first to even
yeah,
start the conversation, and that's okay. Like there is a fine line between being super salesy and people can see it if you like push like every post you have like buy this available. Like there are
yeah.
different tactics, but most of the galleries want collectors to see the prices and they know their collectors and what price range their collectors are able to afford when they come to those galleries.
Yeah, yeah, of course, of course. Um, yeah. I mean, it does make sense for a lot of galleries to do it this or that way. But I believe until like, I don't know, almost like mid-range, it's definitely fine to show your price. At some point, I would advise you not to do it anymore. But that's like a whole different collector universe that you're approaching than when you should not show your price anymore.
Exactly. And then for all of the aspiring curators who would like to join the field, what advice would you like to give them?
To be honest, just do it. I think that's the biggest hurdle to come over, you know, it's like to actually put on a show. Do it, like go out, do studio visits, meet artists, try to look at as much art that you can. Try to find a niche that interests you, try to find something that you want to focus on and be an expert in, and put on a show. Just put on shows and it will teach you so much, you know? It's like I was just talking to a friend over the phone and he's a gallerist. He has a gallery in London. He's from Chicago, but yeah, he's now in London. And we were both saying like, you just have to do it because there's so many issues that will come up. And during a project like that, during the show that you put on, you'll be always like so much smarter for the next one and again and again. And it's like so much learning to be done. And yeah, I think just put on shows. People will come to you. It's actually a surprise sometimes as well who finds your show and how. And sometimes like there are so many people that come to your shows that you did not expect to come. Um, yeah, I think that's the only way to get started in this field.
Absolutely. And for everyone listening who would like to learn more about you and what you do, where they can find you.
You can find me on my Instagram account. So I have two Instagram accounts. There's POV Contemporary. You can find us on there. Or you can find me on my personal account, which is Svenja Katharina Frisch. It's my full name.
Wonderful. And everyone listening, I highly recommend you check your Instagrams and learn more because I think like what you're doing in the industry is so innovative in one way, but also I think the way to move forward for a lot of people entering the art world from like the curatorial side. And it's been such a pleasure to chat with you today, learn more about what you do and your vision. And I hope to meet you one day in person soon.
Yeah, thank you, Liza, for inviting me on this podcast. I was really excited when I got the invitation, and it was a pleasure talking to you.